Hello, my sweet friends, and welcome to episode 1 of my Holiday Happiness Sewing Series. My name is Becky, and I thank you so much for stopping by. In today's video, we're going to be making cord keepers, cup cozies, and bowl cozies. They are oldies but goodies and make the perfect stocking stuffers. So gather up some of your scraps and your other favorite fabrics and let's get these projects started. To save time in the video, I have already cut all of my fabric and batting to size, and I will be going over the size of each one of these as we make each of these products, but I have all of these sizes listed for you in the description box below. For each of these projects, I am using 100% cotton fabric, as well as warm and white cotton batting and 100% cotton thread. We're going to begin with our cord keepers. Our first one is a medium rectangle, and the top and bottom fabric pieces are 3.5 by 8.5, and then I cut the batting a 1/2 inch smaller all the way around. I also want these to have rounded edges, so I took a ribbon spool, and this is a 4-inch ribbon spool, and I just lined it up at the top and traced that arch along the top and bottom of each of my rectangles here. Our next size here, I cut both of my pieces at 2 inches by 5 inches, and the batting is a 1/2 inch smaller all the way around, and I wanted these to have a rounded appearance as well, so I just took my thread spool, placed it at the top, and traced a rounded shape at each corner of these rectangles. And then for our round cord keeper, I again used my ribbon roll to trace a 4-inch circle, and then I cut the batting smaller on our circle size as well. And now take whatever fabric you want to be your bottom or your lining fabric and place that right side up. Take the fabric that you want to be the top fabric and place that right side down so your fabric is right sides together. Then take your batting and lay that on top of the wrong side of your outer fabric. Pin or clip your pieces together and mark to leave a spot for an opening for turning on each one of your pieces. We're going to use the outside of our presser foot as our stitching guide, and we're going to start at our first mark there with a couple of forward and back stitches. And when we come to our circular area here, just use the outside of your presser foot to follow that shape. Then you're just going to continue stitching all the way around your rectangle here, coming back over and ending at this spot with some back stitches to secure those stitches into place. For my small rectangle, I am using the inside of my presser foot as my stitching guide, and again we'll start off with a couple of forward and back stitches, and then we're just going to slowly work our way up to those rounded edges and take our time stitching those. You may have to lift up your presser foot to rearrange your fabric. And sometimes you are going to be stitching over that batting, and that is totally fine. Stitching around until we come up to the other side and end with some back stitches. And for our circle, we're once again going to be using the outside of our presser foot as our stitch guide. Again, starting with some forward and some back stitches. Just slowly keep that fabric aligned with the presser foot as we make our way around the circle. Then end with some back stitches here at your other opening mark. Press your stitches Then trim down all of your seams, but leave that seam allowance intact where you left your opening for turning, and then turn your project. Run your finger along the seams after you've turned them, and then turn all of your seam allowances under and press. I just do the best I can on that circle. It's not going to be perfect, but it's still going to be cute. And now we're going to stitch very close to the edge, and that is going to close our opening, but it's also going to help all those seams to lie nice and flat. And that's what it looks like after stitching. Then you'll just top stitch your remaining 2 pieces the same way. And we're going to use some cam snaps, and that's how we're going to close up our cord keepers. And you have to decide if you want them to snap one on top of each other like that, or if you want to do an overlapping snap closure where you have a snap underneath and one on top like that. It's totally up to you. When I clip them on around the things I actually want to use the cord keepers for, I just think that putting the snaps one on top of each other like that just looks better for the way I want to use them. And on one side of your project, you're going to need a snap cap with a snap stud and another snap cap with a cap socket. I'm going to start with my larger one, fold it in half, and make a little bit of a finger crease on each end, and that's going to mark the middle for us. And then I came up about 1.25 inches from the bottom edge here, making sure that they are both laid one on top of the other. And I'm just going to use a piece of foam here, and then I'm going to take my awl and poke straight through on both sides. I'm using green for my little strawberry one. I think that's super cute. And press down around your fabric to push that flat, and then place the stud over top of that and just kind of push that down. Then take your hand pliers, and there's a depression in there, and you're going to place that snap cap into that depression. Make sure everything is lined up, and then give that a squeeze. That prong is now flattened inside of the stud there. Come to the other end, place our cap on, and push that fabric down. Place the socket on there. We're going to rest that cap inside of that depression. Look, make sure everything's lined up, and again, just give that a good squeeze. And once again, that sharp cap point is flattened inside of that piece. And I tested a couple of times just to make sure that those are in there securely, and I don't need to press on that again. That looks great. And then you would just do that same process when you add the snaps to your other pieces as well. And they are very cute and very practical. Definitely a quick and easy little stocking stuffer. For our next project, we're doing our cup cozies, and there are lots of patterns available on the internet, but I found mine at the sewmod.wordpress.com website, and I will link this for you below. And following your pattern, you'll cut 2 pieces of fabric and 1 piece of batting, and I did cut it to be smaller than the fabric. So with your lining fabric face up, bring one end up and slightly crease that to mark the middle. And then I'm taking a piece of elastic, and if you don't have an elastic roll, you can use just a hair tie and cut into that and use that instead of the elastic. Then take your 5-inch piece of elastic and fold it in half to form a loop, and I cross the ends and lay that on the crease, and then I clip that. Place the outer fabric face down on top of that and lining up the edges. Then place the batting on top of that, and then come to the opposite end and draw some lines there. And I'm using a heat erasable fabric pen because that's where we're going to turn our project, and then pin or clip around the remaining edges. And then I move my clip to the top. And now we're ready to sew it all together. First, I'm coming to where my elastic is, and I am just going to sew back and forth over that elastic a few times, just so it doesn't move on us when we're stitching our seam. Then we're coming to our bottom opening mark, and we're using the outside edge of our presser foot as our seam guide, and going to take a couple of back and forth stitches, pivot at that edge, and continue stitching all the way around our sleeve. Because I didn't cut the batting straight, I will occasionally catch that in my seam, and that's okay. So you'll just continue around the sleeve, pivoting at your corners, and then ending with some back stitches at your other opening mark. Press your stitching and trim your seam allowances, leaving the full seam allowance intact where you marked that for turning, and then turn your project right side out. Then after turning, press all of your seams nice and flat and go back to your machine and stitch very close to the edge all the way around, just like we did when we made our cord keepers. And those just look so nice. Then take a cup, whatever you're planning on putting your cup cozy on, pull that out just a little bit with my pen and mark. And then you'll take needle and thread and hand sew those buttons on to each of the markings. And they just turn out so cute. Again, such a very practical, useful gift, and they work for hot or cold beverages too. Just a very cute, simple, easy, practical, useful gift. And for our last project, we are going to be making some bowl cozies. And I am in desperate need for some new ones. These things have been well used and well loved, so it's just time for some new ones. You can choose to use the same fabric for each side, but since they are reversible, I'm going to use some coordinating fabric on mine. I have 2 squares cut to 10 by 10, 2 pieces of my batting cut to 9.5 by 9.5. I do not put mine in the microwave. I just simply use them to hold either hot soup or cold ice cream. But if you are going to put yours in the microwave, you have to use something such as Wrap and Zap or some other kind of microwave safe batting. First, we're going to turn our fabric right side facing down and place our batting in the middle on top of that. I'm going to draw an X from corner to corner across each of my pieces here. The batting sticks to the fabric quite well, but I still popped a few pins in there just so it doesn't move while I am stitching along those lines. And I'm going to hold my threads to get it started, and then just sew from corner to corner. Then once we reach the end, if you are only going to make one, then you would cut your threads and then go and sew your other line of stitching. But because I want to batch sew, I'm going to sew off the edge of my fabric and make a couple of stitches just in the air. Lift my presser foot, and I'm going to use some tweezers to hold down that edge of the batting. And I'm just going to sew. And again, we're just going to follow that line all the way down to the opposite edge. Again, I'm going to sew off the edge and just do a couple of error stitches. Slightly lift my presser foot and place my next corner in there and begin sewing. I'm going to slightly pull the back there just to get that worked under. And I am going to sew all 6 of my pieces, just chain stitching them together at each corner. And once my chain stitches are all completed, I'm going to go back in and just snip each one of my squares apart. Then I'm going to start at the opposite corner and stitch down that line. And I'm going to chain stitch all of my pieces together once again. Then clip this chain apart, and I'm also going to be clipping off excess threads as well. Remove my pins, and then go and press all my lines of stitching. Looks great already. And now we need to make our darts. So we're going to fold our fabric in half and run your finger along the crease just to make sure your fabric is lying nice and flat. And now we're going to go 1 inch over and make a mark. Then go 2 inches down and make a mark. Then I'm using my ruler and we're going to draw that diagonal line. And I'm going to go 2 inches from the edge there and 1 inch here, and draw that diagonal line. And I'm going to go ahead and mark out my remaining pieces as well. And we're going to sew along that line, coming forward and also putting some back stitches in there. When I get to the end, I'm going to be batch sewing these as well. So make a couple of stitches in the air, slightly lift my presser foot, come forward and do some back stitches, and continue sewing. Do some back stitches, sew on the air, and add another piece. And again, I'm going to be chain stitching all of my pieces together. And then clip these apart and then sew in the darts going the opposite way. Clip that chain apart and also trim threads. And now we're going to open each piece and we're going to fold it in half again, and we're going to do the same markings on this side. 1 inch from the top edge and 2 inches down here, 1 inch in and 2 inches down, and draw our diagonal. I found it was easier to use my smaller ruler. And because I have already demonstrated this, I will be doing this off camera to save time in the video, but you're going to do the same thing and stitch directly on each of those lines on each of your pieces. We're now going to trim down that seam allowance, and I'm leaving about a 1/4 inch there. Just take a few minutes and trim off all of your excess dart seams, just like that. And then after clipping off all of my darts, I'm placing each dart on my tailor's ham and just giving that a good press. And if you don't have a tailor's ham, you can use a rolled up hand towel instead. And that just makes it look so nice and neat. Then you'll take one piece with the right side facing out and match that to the other piece with the right side facing down. So that way you're going to have right sides of fabric facing each other. You're going to pin those together, matching up your darts and your corners, and you're also going to mark a section for turning. When you pin these, you have the option to pin them to sew whichever way you prefer. If you want to lay it down on your sewing machine throat plate and stitch it like this, then you're going to pin it to the inside. If you want to lay it on your throat plate and sew it like this, then you're going to pin it on the outside. So whichever way feels more natural for the way you prefer to sew is how you'll pin these pieces together. So if you've pinned and decided you want to sew on the inside, we're using the outside of our presser foot as our stitch guide. And you're going to start at the bottom marking, come forward, do a couple of back stitches, remove our pins as we go, and we're pivoting slightly at our dart. And then when we come to the corner, we're lifting up and doing a full pivot at that corner. And so you'll just stitch around the outside edge and you'll end up at your other marking. And again, make sure you do some back stitches to lock all of your stitching into place. I prefer to sew on the outside edge, and I have removed my platform so then I can just fit this all around the free arm of my sewing machine. But we're still stitching in the same way, using the outside edge of our presser foot as our seam guide. Make a couple of stitches forward and backward. Removing the pins as we go, making a slight pivot at our darts. And a full pivot at our corners. And stitching all the way around the outside edge, again until we come to our other mark, and backstitch there to secure those stitches as well. Then after stitching, you want to go back and clip all of your corners. Then go to your opening, and we're going to turn it right side out. And I just usually put my fingers in there and grab the opposing corner and then turn it right side out. Then you want to use something with a blunt end to push those corners out. And I'm just using a paintbrush handle. And just poke it out as best you can on all four corners. And then I run my finger along all of those seam allowances. Just kind of flatten that out from the inside. Then work those seams flat and give everything a good press. And then tuck under and press the edges where your opening was and either pin or clip that closed. And then we're going to stitch very close to this edge, and that is going to close up the opening. And it's also going to top stitch the project so it just gives it a nice finish and these edges don't roll out. And I'm going to take a couple of back stitches here as well. And I want to make sure that these open edges stay one on top of the other and that I catch both of those edges in this seam. I'm going to come right to where that seam is on our dart and do a little pivot there and continue stitching. Then when we come to the corner, we're going to do a full pivot. And you'll just continue stitching all the way around the outside edge of your bowl cozy. And there you have it. That just really gives a nice clean finish. And these are just so cute, quick, easy, and fun to make. And they hold a variety of sizes of different bowls. Just like that. And you could experiment with the size of the dart and the size of the base. You could round off the edges if you didn't like these corners. There are just so many different ways to make these, but they always turn out really, really cute. And I like the kitchen themed fabric that I've chosen, and the roses with the teapot just beautiful. I love this with the whimsical little woodland look and our mushrooms there. How cute is that? And that gorgeous dark navy with the lemons on that, just so pretty as well. And if you have beautiful Christmas fabric, they would be cute made out of your Christmas fabric as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. It has been my pleasure to sew with you. And if you enjoyed today's tutorials, please give this video a like and consider subscribing. That way you never miss an episode of my Holiday Happiness Sewing Series. And until next time, my sweet friends, be blessed.